On August 17, 1943, American bombers emerged over Regensburg, Germany at 11:45 in the morning. They had lifted off from England more than 6 hours earlier. By every calculation, it should not have been possible. Range tables showed they should have turned back nearly 300 miles earlier. Fuel estimates dictated an abort somewhere over occupied France. And yet, they continued. 230 B-17s crossed the Alps, struck deep inside Bavaria, then pressed on south across the Mediterranean. They did not return to England. They landed in North Africa, more than 1,000 miles one way, without fighter escort for most of the journey. German High Command demanded answers. American doctrine offered none. The war room at 8th Air Force Headquarters in High Wycombe, England, was heavy with cigarette smoke and the dull churn of ventilation fighting a losing battle. Maps lined the walls. Red threads marked bomber routes across the Channel, over the Low Countries, and into Germany. Every line stopped short of the industrial heartland. The threads ended where escort fighters ran out of fuel. It was early summer 1943. The combined bomber offensive was not winning. It was barely enduring. Losses over targets like Schweinfurt and Plattling were counted in double-digit percentages. Some missions lost more aircraft than they destroyed factories. The numbers could not be sustained. Planners knew it. Air crews knew it. The enemy knew it. Brigadier General Henry Harley Arnold, known to everyone as Hap, sat in Washington with reports spread across his desk. He commanded the Army Air Forces. He answered to Marshall, to Roosevelt, indirectly to Churchill, and ultimately to the relentless math of industrial warfare. His faith was unwavering. Air power, applied precisely and in overwhelming force, could cripple German industry. It could shorten the conflict. It could save lives in the end. But conviction did not extend range. It did not thicken armor plating. It did not bring crews home. Arnold was no mystic. He was a realist with vision. He had flown with the Wright brothers. He had survived early aviation, when engines quit and wings failed. He built an air arm from almost nothing. He understood metal fatigue, fuel consumption, and crew endurance as well as any engineer. And he understood the central constraint choking his campaign. American heavy bombers could reach the Ruhr, but barely. They could reach Munich, but not consistently, and they could not go farther without surrendering the return flight. Doctrine was explicit. Bombers attacked in daylight. They flew tight formations for overlapping defensive fire. They relied on altitude, speed, and the Norden bombsight for accuracy. Fighter escort accompanied them as far as fuel permitted, then turned back. The bombers continued alone. They faced flak. They faced interceptors with time to climb, organize, and attack in coordinated waves. They faced losses that bravery alone could not overcome. Arnold read casualty reports knowing each percentage point represented 10 men. He read intelligence summaries showing German fighter production rising, not falling. He read requests from 8th Air Force Commander Ira Eaker asking for more aircraft, better escorts, clearer skies, and time to build strength, time to learn, time the enemy was also exploiting. By the summer of 1943, two ideas collided. One was the belief that strategic bombing could win wars by destroying an enemy's ability to manufacture weapons. The other was the hard truth that unescorted bombers flying deep into hostile territory could not survive long enough to make the theory work. Arnold was trapped between them. He had promised results. He had defended the doctrine against Navy critics and Army ground commanders who saw heavy bombers as a waste of resources. He could not afford failure. The limiting factor was always range. Fighters like the P-47 Thunderbolt were formidable but short-legged. They could escort bombers to the German frontier, sometimes a little farther, then had to turn back or risk running dry over enemy ground. The P-38 Lightning could go farther, but there were too few of them, and they suffered maintenance problems in Europe's cold, damp climate. The answer everyone wanted, a true long-range escort fighter, did not yet exist in usable numbers. So the bombers flew on alone. They flew in the hundreds, stacked in combat boxes bristling with .50 caliber guns. They flew with discipline and resolve, and they came back missing scores of aircraft, trailing smoke, landing with wounded and dead aboard. Some never returned. Arnold knew he could not wait for a flawless solution. Plans for invading Europe were underway. The Soviets were hemorrhaging men on the Eastern Front and demanding a second front in the West. The combined chiefs had committed to crippling German war production before any ground invasion. That required deep penetration raids. It meant accepting losses, but it also meant finding a way to stretch what was thought possible. The proposal was audacious. Instead of turning back to England, what if the bombers kept flying? What if they hit a target deep inside Germany and continued south, landing in North Africa? A shuttle mission. One way out, refuel and rearm in the Mediterranean, then strike again on the return or operate from the south. It effectively doubled range. It opened targets previously unreachable. It split German defenses, forcing them to guard against attacks from two directions. The idea was not entirely new. Shuttle raids had been discussed before, but the logistics were immense. Fuel and bombs had to be staged in North Africa. Navigation had to be exact. There was no safety margin when there was no home base to limp toward. Alpine weather had to cooperate. Crew rest, maintenance, and coordination between two theaters had to align, all while disguising the mission as routine so the Germans would not anticipate the escape route. Eaker hesitated. He had lost too many crews to approve a plan that introduced new dangers. Arnold saw it differently. He saw proof that range was not an immovable wall. That doctrine could flex. That air power, intelligently applied, could achieve what the enemy believed unattainable. If this history matters to you, tap like and subscribe. Curtis Emerson LeMay was 36 years old. He did not resemble a visionary. He looked like a man who had forgotten how to sleep. His face was broad, often unreadable. He chewed unlit cigars. He wasted no words. He commanded the 305th Bomb Group and later the 3rd Bomb Division. His reputation rested on two facts: his bombers came back, and they hit their targets. LeMay did not believe in luck. He believed in fuel discipline, tight formations, and aggressive suppression of fighter attacks through coordinated defensive fire. He believed that if crews flew straight and level through flak on the bomb run, the bombardier had a chance to hit something. If they jinked, they burned fuel, broke formation, and scattered bombs over empty ground. His crews hated the straight approach. They flew it anyway, because LeMay's groups lost fewer aircraft, and everyone knew it. Trained as a navigator, he understood dead reckoning, wind drift, and how tiny errors compounded over long distances. He knew most crews became lost not from incompetence, but from indiscipline. They trusted gut feeling over instruments. They flew headings that felt right instead of those calculated before takeoff. LeMay drilled navigation until it became automatic. He flew with his crews, not from behind a desk. He knew the smell of a cockpit 6 hours into a mission, when oil fumes mixed with sweat and icy air. When planners briefed the Regensburg North Africa shuttle, LeMay was selected to lead the first wave, not because of seniority, but because he would not deviate. He would not turn back early. He would not allow his formation to fragment or lose cohesion. If the mission could be done, he would do it. The target was Regensburg, home to a Messerschmitt factory producing Bf-109 fighters. It lay 200 miles beyond existing escort range. The plan was simple in theory and brutal in practice. Take off from England. Fly southeast across the Channel and occupied Europe. Strike Regensburg. Continue south over the Alps. Cross the Mediterranean. Land in North Africa. Total distance exceeded 1,000 miles. Time aloft would surpass 10 hours for the lead aircraft, longer for those that lagged. LeMay studied the fuel numbers. There was no reserve. Weather delays would doom the mission. Headwinds would doom it. Navigation mistakes would doom it. Combat damage increasing drag would force aircraft to ditch in the Mediterranean. There was no margin. He briefed his crews without theatrics. Maximum fuel, reduced ammunition to save weight. Exact airspeed to optimize range. Rigid formation to reduce individual fuel burn through slipstream advantage. No deviation from the planned route under any circumstances. If an aircraft fell behind, it would not be escorted back. It would be on its own. There were no questions. The men knew LeMay did not authorize missions he did not believe were achievable. If he said it could be done, they trusted the calculations. They did not trust the enemy to make it easy. That was another matter entirely. The aircrews preparing for Regensburg are not rookies. By mid-1943, the 8th Air Force has learned bitter lessons. Early raids were flown with inadequate training, poor formation discipline, and optimistic assumptions about German defenses. Crews learned that the Luftwaffe does not give up. That flak over the Ruhr is as thick as thunderclouds. That frostbite, hypoxia, and mechanical failure kill as surely as bullets. These men are professionals now. They know how to put on an electrically heated suit in the dark. They know the sound a good engine makes at 23,000 feet and the sound it makes when a cylinder fails. They know how to clear a jammed gun with numb fingers. They know the navigator's job is to save their lives and the bombardier's job is to make the terror worthwhile. Lame walks the hard stands. The night before the mission, he does not give speeches. He watches the ground crews loading bombs and topping off fuel tanks. He watches armorers feeding belts into gun bays. He smells hydraulic fluid and high-octane gasoline. He sees young men moving with the efficiency of repetition because repetition is the only thing that keeps aircraft flying and men alive. There is a stillness before a maximum effort mission. Not peace, stillness, the kind that comes when everyone knows the odds and chooses to step forward anyway. Lame feels it. He does not speak of it. He returns to his quarters and reviews the route one more time. Takeoff is set for dawn. Weather over the Alps is forecast to be clear. Forecast not guaranteed. He does not sleep much. Few commanders do the night before they send men beyond the point of return. Doctrine is written in Fuel and Physics. AB-17F Flying Fortress carries 2,400 gal of gasoline in wing and fuselage tanks. At cruise settings, it burns roughly 200 gal per hour. That gives 12 hours of flight in theory. In practice, takeoff, climb to altitude, formation, assembly, combat maneuvers, and any defensive action all increase consumption. A realistic maximum mission duration is 9 to 10 hours. After that, tanks run dry. The distance from England to Regensburg is approximately 450 miles. A direct return flight would total 900 m, pushing the edge of possible range, but remaining within doctrine if winds cooperate and combat is brief. But Regensburg is not the difficult part. The difficulty is what happens after. From Regensburg, the bomber stream must continue south over the Alps, where peaks reach 12,000 feet and weather changes without warning. Across northern Italy, where German and Italian air defenses are still active. Over the Mediterranean, where a ditched bomber becomes a search and rescue problem with low odds of success, to airfields in Algeria and Tunisia, newly secured, barely equipped, and more than 600 m from the target. Total mission distance exceeds 1,000 miles. Flight time, assuming no delays, will approach or exceed 10 hours. There is no published doctrine for this. There is no training syllabus. The flight manuals do not cover one-way strategic raids. The fuel charts do not include alpine crossing factors. Every calculation is done by hand on paper with assumptions that must hold true or men will die. Laymen as planners work backward from fuel exhaustion. They calculate cruise speed, altitude, and power settings that will stretch range to the absolute limit. They assume no combat over the target, which is absurd. They assume perfect navigation, which is optimistic. They assume no aircraft will suffer damage that increases drag, which is fantasy. But they calculate it anyway because the mission has been ordered and the numbers must close. Weight is everything. Extra ammunition is offloaded. Personal items are left behind. Even some armor plating is removed from selected aircraft. Bomb loads are reduced slightly to allow maximum fuel. The aircraft will be lighter over the target, which improves fuel economy but reduces defensive firepower and protection. It is a trade. Everything is a trade. The other problem is formation integrity. Bomber formations work because aircraft fly in tight groups overlapping fields of fire to create a defensive sphere. Stragglers are killed. Always. German fighters ignore the formation and pick off isolated bombers. They attack from angles the lone gunner cannot cover. B-17 alone is a target. AB-17 in formation is part of a flying fortress, but formation flying burns extra fuel, constant throttle adjustments to hold position, maneuvering to avoid collisions, climbing to stay with the group. If you fall behind on a normal mission, this is acceptable. On a mission with zero fuel margin, it could be fatal. Lane briefs his pilots to fly loose formations, wider spacing, less jockeying for position. It reduces defensive effectiveness, but it saves fuel. Another trade. There is also the question of what happens if the mission is delayed. Weather over England is unpredictable. Fog, low clouds, and rain can scrub a mission or delay takeoff by hours. If the Regensburg force takes off late, they will arrive over North Africa after dark. The airfields there are not equipped for night recovery of hundreds of bombers. There are no lighted runways, no instrument approach systems. Crews will have to find blacked out airstrips in the desert by dead reckoning and hope. The planners propose a two-wave attack. Lane's force will hit Regensburg and continue south. A second Force will strike Schweinfurt, a ball-bearing production center, and return to England. The two raids will split German defenses and complicate interception, but the timing must be precise. If the second wave is delayed, the Luftwaffe will have time to rearm and refuel after engaging the first wave. They will be waiting. Ecker approves the plan with reservations. He tells Lame, the mission will proceed only if weather is favorable and timing holds. Lame acknowledges. He knows weather will not be perfect. He knows timing will slip. He prepares. Anyway, Arnold in Washington receives word that the mission is planned. He does not interfere. He is pushed for deeper raids for proof that American bombers can reach any target in Europe. This mission, if successful, will validate years of argument. If it fails, it will provide ammunition to those who believe strategic bombing is a costly experiment with limited results. He waits. The night before the raid, intelligence reports indicate increased Luftwaffe activity near the planned route. German radar stations have been tracking the buildup of American bomber forces in England. They know something large is coming. They do not know where. The advantage of surprise is slim, but it exists. Fuel trucks make final rounds. At the bomber bases, ground crews check oil levels, tire pressure, and oxygen bottles. Armorers ensure guns are clean and belts are loaded without kinks. Meteorologists update weather forecasts, noting a slight shift in upper level winds. Not enough to scrub the mission, enough to matter. Lane walks to his aircraft in the pre-dawn dark. He will fly in the lead B-17, not because he has to, but because he always does. His crew knows his habits. They do not speak much. They run checklists by flashlight. Engines cough, catch, and settle into a deep rumble. Across the field, more than 200 bombers come to life. The sound is immense. It rolls across the countryside like distant thunder. There is no turning back now. The mission is not yet in the air, but it is already in motion. The first aircraft lifts off at 9 in the morning. The second follows 30 seconds later. Then another and another. The sky fills with the sound of right cyclone engines at full throttle. Dust and smoke swirl in the prop wash. By the time the last bomber clears the runway, the first is already turning southeast, climbing, beginning the slow process of assembly. Lane's lead aircraft circles over a designated radio beacon. Other bombers join, slotting into position. The formation builds in layers, groups stacking into wings, wings into a division. It takes time. Fuel is already burning. 30 minutes after takeoff, the bombers are still over England forming up. This is normal. It is also costly. Every minute in the air is a minute closer to empty tanks. At 9:30, the formation is nearly complete. Lane checks his watch. The plan called for departure by now. They are behind schedule. The second wave tasked with hitting Schweinfurt has not yet taken off. Weather over their bases is worse. Fog, low clouds, visibility near minimums. The timing is slipping. Lane faces a choice. Wait for the second wave, preserving the element of coordinated attack, but burn more fuel and arrive over North Africa in marginal daylight. Or go now, accept that the Luftwaffe will have time to recover between attacks but maintain fuel reserves. He considers for less than a minute. Fuel is not negotiable. He signals the formation to proceed. The bomber stream turns southeast. Escort fighters P-47 Thunderbolts join near the coast. They will stay as long as their fuel allows, perhaps an hour, perhaps less. Then the bombers will be alone. The crews know this. It is the reality of every deep raid. But today, the loneliness will last longer. The formation crosses the English Channel at 23,000 feet. The air is cold. Temperatures outside hover near 40 below zero. Gunners flex their fingers inside heated gloves. They watch the sky, scanning for the small dark shapes that mean enemy fighters. The channel below is gray and textured with white caps. It looks deceptively close. It is 4 miles down over France. The first flak appears, black puffs of smoke blossoming in clusters. The bombers fly straight. The formations do not waver. The flak is intense, but not perfectly accurate. Most bursts are slightly off in altitude or deflection. A few bombers take hits. Metal punctures. Hydraulic lines sever. One engine on AB-17 trails smoke then feathers. The aircraft drops back slightly but holds formation. The crew does not abort. Not yet. The P-47s reach their fuel limit over eastern France. They waggle their wings and turn back. The bomber crews watch them go. Now it is just altitude, formation, and the guns. The Luftwaffe knows they are coming. Radar has tracked them since the coast. Fighter controllers are vectoring interceptors into position. The Germans have time to climb, to organize, to choose their attack angles. The first fighters appear near the German border. Bf-19s and FW-190s, small and fast, climbing from below. They do not attack immediately. They position themselves, forming up into attack groups. This is the doctrine the Luftwaffe has perfected. Do not engage in ones and twos. Mass the attack. Overwhelm the defenses. Focus on one bomber at a time. The attacks begin in earnest near Stuttgart. Fighters come from 12 o'clock high, the most dangerous angle, where the bomber's forward guns have limited traverse. Tracers arc across the sky. Bombers shudder as rounds hit. Gunners fire back, long bursts trying to disrupt the attack runs. Spent shell casings pile up on the floor of the waste gun positions. The smell of gunpowder fills the fuselage. One bomber takes a hit in the cockpit. The pilot slumps. The co-pilot grabs the controls, fighting to keep the aircraft level. The bomber slides out of formation, losing altitude. Fighters swarm it. It goes down, trailing fire, spinning. No parachutes visible. Another bomber loses two engines on the same side. It cannot hold altitude. It falls behind and the formation moves on. Alone, it does not last long. Lames aircraft takes hits in the wings and tail. The damage is not critical, but fuel is leaking from a punctured tank. The flight engineer reports the loss. Lame calculates they have enough to reach the target and continue south. Barely. There is no reserve now. None. The formation presses on. More fighters attack. More bombers fall. The defensive fire is effective enough to keep the fighters cautious, but not enough to stop them. The mathematics of attrition are grinding forward. The Luftwaffe can afford to break off and rearm. The bombers cannot stop. They can only continue. Regensburg appears ahead. A cluster of industrial buildings along the Danube. Flak intensifies. The bombers enter the killing zone. Straight and level. Bomb bay doors open. Bombarders hunched over Norden sights, making final adjustments. Air speed steady, altitude steady. The aircraft shudder with each near miss. The bomb run lasts 2 minutes. It feels longer. Bombs release. The aircraft lurch upward, suddenly lighter. The formations turn south, away from the target. Smoke rises behind them. Fires are visible. The attack is successful, but there is no time to assess damage. The Alps are ahead. Fuel is dropping. The mission is only half over. The bomber stream crosses into Austria, then over the Brenner Pass. The mountains rise on either side, snow-covered peaks shining in the midday sun. The bombers are above the peaks, but not by much. Any aircraft with damage, with failing engines, with excessive fuel consumption, will not clear the mountains. Some do not. They turn back toward Germany, hoping to find flat ground for an emergency landing. They are captured or killed. The remainder press on across northern Italy and out over the Mediterranean. Fuel gauges are buried in the red. Pilots lean the mixture to the brink of engine failure, exchanging power for endurance. Engines stumble and cough. Some crews manually shift fuel from tank to tank, balancing the load, extracting every last mile. Land appears on the southern horizon, North Africa. The airfields lie somewhere ahead in the haze. Navigation now becomes unforgiving. There are no second chances. Miss the field and there is no fuel to search for another. LeMay's navigator confirms the heading. The formation descends. Engines sputter unevenly. Some bombers touch down with less than 10 minutes of fuel left. Others arrive on vapors, engines dying as they roll to a halt. 122 bombers reach North Africa. 24 are lost over Germany. The rest are scattered, damaged, or forced to ditch. LeMay climbs out of his aircraft and lights a cigar. His face betrays nothing. The mission was feasible, barely. The ground crews in North Africa are not truly ready for this. They were told bombers might arrive from the north. They were instructed to stage fuel and basic maintenance supplies, but the reality of more than 100 battle-damaged B-17s arriving nearly dry, carrying wounded, with damage ranging from superficial to catastrophic, is something else entirely. The airfields at Tunis and Bonn are primitive, packed earth and pierced steel planking. There are no hardstands, no revetments. Fuel trucks are scarce. Medical facilities are stretched thin. The logistics of turning an entire bomber force around for another mission within 24 hours, the plan, seem impossible. The ground crews begin anyway. The wounded are unloaded first. Medics move through the aircraft, checking for injuries not reported over the radio. Some gunners have been unconscious for hours from hypoxia or blood loss. Some wounds were frozen at altitude, bleeding halted by the cold. Now, on the ground in the heat, they reopen. Medical tents fill quickly. Aircraft inspections begin. Bullet holes are counted not for records but to judge structural strength. Hydraulic leaks are sealed. Tires shredded by flak are replaced when spares exist. Engines that leaked oil or ran rough are examined. Some cannot be fixed in the field. Those bombers will not fly the next mission. They will wait for parts, for time, or for transport back to England if local repair is impossible. Fuel becomes the immediate crisis. Tanker trucks cannot meet demand. In some cases, fuel is hand-pumped from barrels. It is slow, exhausting work. The heat is brutal, over 100 degrees in the shade, and shade is scarce. Ground crews labor through the afternoon and into the night. Pilots and co-pilots pitch in. Everyone helps. There is no alternative. LeMay walks the flight line, making notes: what aircraft can fly tomorrow, which crews are too battered to continue. He does not ask how they feel. He asks whether they can do it again. Most say yes. Some lie. He knows they are lying. He accepts the lie because he needs the crews. That evening, reports are sent back to England. The mission is declared a success. The target was hit. The shuttle concept worked. Losses were high but within acceptable limits, a phrase that means something very different to the men who flew than to the men who wrote it. Arnold receives the summary in Washington. He reads it twice, then picks up the phone and calls Eaker. He wants to know if it can be repeated. Eaker is cautious. Fuel stocks in North Africa are fragile. The Luftwaffe now knows the bombers did not return to England. They will adapt. Fighters will be positioned along southern routes. The element of surprise is gone. Still, yes, it can be repeated once, perhaps twice more, before logistical strain makes it impossible. Arnold orders him to proceed. He does not celebrate. He understands the mission for what it is, evidence that range is a variable, not a constant, that doctrine can bend if crews are willing and planners are bold, that the air war contains more possibilities than previously assumed. He returns to his paperwork and begins drafting a memorandum on long-range escort requirements. The shuttle mission provided proof. It did not solve the underlying problem. In England, the second wave finally departs hours late. They strike Schweinfurt and return home. The delay gives the Luftwaffe time to rearm after engaging LeMay's force. The Schweinfurt raiders encounter coordinated mass attacks. They lose 36 bombers, more than 15% of the formation. The losses are catastrophic. Some groups are nearly wiped out. The surviving crews land shaken, not by fear, but by arithmetic. If each mission costs this much, there will be no crews left by winter. The two missions, Regensburg and Schweinfurt, are studied together. The shuttle worked. The price was high but tolerable. The second raid, the traditional deep penetration with return to England, was a slaughter. The conclusion is unavoidable. Without long-range escort, deep raids will bleed the 8th Air Force white. The shuttle postponed that reckoning. It did not prevent it. Arnold already knows this. He has known it for months. But now he has confirmation that bombers can penetrate deep into Germany and strike targets once considered unreachable. The question is no longer whether it can be done. The question is whether it can be sustained. For now, the answer is no, not without fighters that can go the distance. In North Africa, the bombers are refueled and rearmed by dawn. LeMay briefs the next mission, a strike on targets in southern France on the return leg to England. The crews are exhausted. They have flown 10 hours, slept poorly in the heat, and now face another long sortie. They climb into their aircraft anyway. Engines start. Formations assemble. The shuttle mission is not over. They lift off, heading north toward Europe. The operations continue. The German response to Regensburg is confusion followed by alarm. Radar stations tracked the inbound bomber stream. Fighter controllers vectored interceptors. The engagement unfolded as expected: heavy defensive fire, multiple bombers destroyed, the rest pressing on. Then the bombers turned south. In post-war reflections, Arnold addresses the bomber offensive. He acknowledges the losses. He defends the strategy. He argues that air power, properly applied, shortened the war and spared lives that would have been lost in prolonged ground fighting. He does not mention Regensburg by name, but the mission is woven into his logic. It proves air power is not static, that it adapts, that it reaches. The lesson of the shuttle is not that long-range bombing won the war. It is that operational limits are often assumptions, not absolutes. Fuel range, escort radius, crew endurance all can be extended when necessity demands and planning is disciplined. The mission succeeded because planners questioned the assumption that bombers must always come home. They asked, what if we keep going? The answer was 1,000 miles, 10 hours, and a transformed understanding of what was possible. The air war over Europe continues for 2 more years. Losses grow. Raids reach deeper: Berlin, Ploesti, Dresden. The list lengthens. Bombers keep flying. Doctrine evolves. Escort fighters arrive. Attrition shifts from catastrophic to sustainable. The 8th Air Force becomes the most powerful aerial armada ever assembled. But it begins with missions like Regensburg, where men flew beyond the edge of the possible and returned with evidence. Arnold never said it was easy. He never said it was cheap. What he said, in memos, meetings, quiet exchanges, was that it worked. And in war, that is the only verdict that matters. The shuttle mission, more than 1,000 miles long, proved that distance is a challenge of planning, not physics. That courage without calculation is waste. That air power is not just bombs and guns, but fuel, navigation, timing, and the willingness to challenge what manuals declare impossible. The sky is not a barrier. It is a medium. And those who understand it, who respect its dangers and exploit its possibilities, will always reach farther than those who do not. Not west toward England, south. At first, controllers assumed deception, a feint meant to split defenses. But the bombers kept flying over the Alps, beyond radar range, gone. Reports arrived from Italy, American bombers heading south over the Mediterranean. It defied established patterns. American heavy bombers always returned to England. Always by nightfall. Intelligence officers connected the dots. The bombers had landed in North Africa. A shuttle mission. A one-way strike. The implications were immediate. If bombers could stage from the south, targets in southern Germany, Austria, and the Balkans were now exposed. Defensive planning had focused on approaches from the west and northwest. Now defenses had to be divided, thinned, stretched across multiple vectors. Luftwaffe High Command ordered increased patrols over the Alps and northern Italy. Fighters were repositioned. Radar coverage was expanded where possible, but resources were limited. Every fighter shifted south meant one fewer guarding against raids from England. Every radar redeployment opened gaps elsewhere. The shuttle did not destroy vast infrastructure, but it forced a reassessment of what was possible. Hitler was briefed. He demanded to know how American bombers crossed the Alps and reached North Africa without being annihilated. The answers were unsatisfying. The bombers had been engaged. Many were shot down, but the Americans absorbed the losses and pressed on. That was the unsettling part. The willingness to accept casualties in pursuit of strategic goals suggested a depth of resources and resolve difficult to counter. In Washington, Arnold reads intelligence reports detailing the German response, fighter redeployments, shifting priorities. The shuttle had succeeded not just tactically, but strategically. It compelled the enemy to disperse resources, question assumptions, and defend against possibilities rather than certainties. This was the leverage Arnold wanted, not the destruction of one factory, but disruption of an entire defensive system. He writes a memorandum to his staff. The Regensburg shuttle proves operational range can be extended through logistical innovation. It also proves the cost is severe. Future shuttles should be undertaken only when strategic value justifies the risk and expenditure. More importantly, the mission underscores the urgent need for long-range escort fighters. Until that capability exists, deep raids will remain costly and unsustainable. Arnold chooses his words carefully. He believes in air power, but he is not blind to loss. The 8th Air Force is losing aircraft and crews faster than experienced replacements can be trained. New crews arrive with minimal seasoning. Many are shot down on their first or second missions. The loss rate is not merely numerical, it erodes effectiveness. A force can grow larger while becoming weaker. The P-51 Mustang is under development, fitted with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine that provides the range and performance required for deep escort, but it is not yet available in numbers. Months remain. Until then, bombers will fly alone or with partial escort, and losses will continue. Regensburg provided proof of concept. It did not buy time. Eaker, back in England, receives orders to prepare additional shuttle missions if conditions allow. He is skeptical. The logistical burden on North African bases is immense.
Fuel, ammunition, and maintenance supplies must be diverted from other operations.
Crews are exhausted. Aircraft are wearing out.
He agrees to plan future shuttles but does not expect them to become routine.
They cannot be. The system will not sustain it. LeMay and his crews return to England after striking targets in southern France.
The return leg is quieter than the outbound flight.
The Luftwaffe is less aggressive, perhaps conserving strength, perhaps repositioning. The bombers land with fewer losses than expected. LeMay debriefs and files his report. The mission was workable. It was not repeatable as standard practice. He does not recommend turning it into doctrine. He recommends keeping it as an option.
Arnold reads the report and underlines the word option. That is what the shuttle represents, not a substitute for strategy, but an expansion of possibility.
In war, possibility is currency.
The ability to strike from unexpected directions at unexpected times forces the enemy to defend everywhere.
It stretches him thin. It creates opportunity.
But Arnold also understands that possibility without resources is only planning.
Shuttle missions consumed aircraft, fuel, and crews that could have been used elsewhere. Cost must always be weighed against benefit.
In the case of Regensburg, the benefit is clear: a factory damaged, defenses disrupted, doctrine proven flexible.
The cost is 24 bombers and more than 200 men. The arithmetic never goes away. The Regensburg North Africa shuttle fades quickly from headlines.
By September, the air war moves on.
Raids continue. Losses mount. The push into Germany intensifies.
The shuttle concept is used again sparingly when targets and logistics align. It never becomes routine.
It was never intended to.
But inside planning staffs, something changes.
The assumption that bombers must always return to their departure base is no longer absolute.
Missions can be built around fuel range if a destination exists beyond the target.
New target sets appear. New timing options emerge. New ways to divide and confuse enemy defenses are considered. The mental map of what is possible expands.
Arnold does not claim victory. He issues no triumphant statements.
He presses harder.
He accelerates P-51 deployment.
He demands more bombers, more crews, more sorties.
The shuttle mission showed that range could be extended through planning and logistics, but he knows the real solution is escort fighters that can accompany bombers to Berlin and back.
That capability arrives in early 1944.
When it does, the air war changes decisively.
LeMay is promoted.
He later commands bombing operations in the Pacific, where lessons of fuel discipline, formation control, and long-range planning become even more critical. Regensburg becomes a footnote in his career, but a footnote containing the seeds of everything that follows: acceptance of risk, refusal to be constrained by doctrine, and the understanding that war is a problem to be solved, not a script to be obeyed. The crews who flew the mission rarely speak of it. They return to rotation.
They fly again.
Some finish their tours.
Some do not.
The shuttle is one mission among many, distinguished by distance and novelty but not by fear or exhaustion.
Those are constants.
Years later, historians analyze the Regensburg raid.
They examine fuel figures, timing, and losses.
They debate whether it was worth the cost. The answer depends on how one measures.
By factories destroyed, the return is limited.
By defensive disruption and doctrinal innovation, it is substantial. By the lives of more than 200 men killed or wounded, the cost is absolute.